Hello everyone and welcome back to Aman Talks NRL SuperCoach here for the round 21 trade targets and preview stream. Good to see already a lot of you in the chat. If you're interested in my hair, that obviously comes up quite a bit in the chat. Got a haircut today, so yeah, it's nice tidy trim. I thought I'd get it done, just before streaming day because you all seem to love it so much. And if you do like that, please do give the stream a like as well. Good to see some familiar faces already in the chat with Martin Lau, Lachlan Camilleri, Blayke, Ben McGregor, Luke, Jason Yang, Hugh, as always. So yeah, plenty of familiar names in the chat, which is awesome. Apologies, couldn't stream on Sunday. It's been tough to do the Sunday streams. I've just been really busy with weekends, and so it's been difficult to try to consistently do those. So apologies for that. But as long as I can continue to do the Tuesday ones, they're the main ones anyway. It wasn't me trying to get away from not streaming because I didn't own Edwards. It definitely wasn't that. It was other things as well that came up, but I thought I would quickly do a rank check as well because I know some people might be interested and obviously didn't do the stream on Sunday. So yeah, it was a terrible week for me. 1097, I got hit really bad. Obviously no Edwards was the big thing, but then I traded in Britton Nikora for Dylan Lucas and he got 4 points, got knocked out so early in the game, and ruled out again this week, which sucks because, you saw what the Bunnies dished up last week against the Panthers. Not having Nikora for this matchup really isn't great. And then I had Tino's 14. I captained Karaz, which was okay. But I had like 9 scores under 50. Just a lot of mid. Kickout, Teddy, Mark Nwangani, Tawasi, Connor Watson, etc. Like there were so many guys in my team who just didn't do well. So yeah, it was a pretty bad week for me. The only copium that I could get was, I can see Lachlan saying, Edwards captain as Unite. I hope that people listen to the stream every week, but I really hope that you listened last week because I was so confident in Edwards. I didn't think he'd get 173, of course. I thought he might get like 110, 120. I pretty much said, though, if you had Pappenhausen last week, sell to Edwards, and if you get an Edwards, you captain him because he was just like the standout in a week where there wasn't a whole lot of huge or great captain options. And he was a massive separator. And we'll talk about like high upside players and when to be trying to use your trades to target these kind of matchups. Because of course, in hindsight, I would have just traded one of my fullbacks out to get Edwards and captained him. But I had a setup of Teddy, Pappy, and Walsh. So maybe it was a lesson from the week before to not rush in a Reece Walsh last week. But in that circumstance, I needed to get in a number. I was short, and Reece Walsh had the Titans. So again, I'm trying to use the trades to chase those big scores. Reece Walsh versus the Titans, I thought could maybe have been 130 game. In the end, he scored like 80. And of course, it denied me the opportunity of getting an Edwards who went absolutely massive. So we'll talk about Edwards a lot later in the stream as well. But yeah, of course, it was pretty rough not owning Edwards. But I hope any of you out there who did jump on him, who did captain him, really enjoyed some green arrows. I had plenty of people message me saying, thank you for giving the advice because of that, I captained him over Teddy. And this is like, it's the biggest dilemma or the biggest like catch-22 when you're a creator is like, you want to give the good advice and give the best advice. And it really paid off last week. But then when I couldn't do it myself, it hurt me. And so you're really just kind of in a dilemma with yourself, not about whether you should give that good advice, but when it comes off in that manner, yeah, it really sucks not being able to do it yourself because I would have celebrated with everyone else, but it was what it was. What can you do about it? Jason Yang says, Aman, have you played Rugby League 26 or planning to? Honestly, I had other people message me as well. Even before the game was released, I honestly had zero interest in purchasing it. Just everything I was reading about it up until the game got released didn't look great. It's not cheap as well. It was $120. So I was just like, look, it's not worth it for me to buy it. I don't have a lot of time these days to game as much as I used to back in my uni days when I would be gaming for many, many hours. Not quite the same nowadays. So as it currently stands, the way that the game is, I have no intention of buying it. If it turns out to be better, if they fix it and add some patches and whatnot to it, then yeah, maybe I will look to buy it, but just not for the time being, I think. Lovely beard of mine says, Hugh, thank you. I'll take that. I also gave that a trim as well. I wanted to take Edwards so bad. Do you reckon Edwards is a must this week? From Pappy, says William. Daniel saying 17th coming into this week. How do I guarantee that I win? Well, firstly, congrats on the ranking. That is an awesome ranking. I wish I could swap places with you, but I'm in a 3309 season rank. And what's even worse is I've got 5 trades left. So This is not fine, but as the meme says, this is fine. For anyone listening on audio, the classic dog in a house burning on fire. This is fine meme. Yeah, I've just got that up on screen because that's how I feel, left with only 5 trades. And my entire second row forward bench is injured. Koloamatangi, Britton Nikora, Tina Fasumala-Awi. It's carnage. We had Dylan Lucas. We've had Val Holmes, who I traded in the week before. I've had to sell. Yeah, I've just been hit really badly with injuries and it's just really not paid off. And yeah, I traded in Brian Toto last week because of the Val injury. And of course, he went and scored bugger all. And, everyone else in the outside backs scored a try or got attacking stats and he got nothing. Just the way it is. But it's all good. We will put our chin up and we'll look ahead to the future weeks. But yeah, obviously, you're going to have to be really, really conservative with trades about where I want to use them because this is probably the lowest trades I've ever had at this point in the season in round 21. I've normally had maybe 8 to 10. Having 5 left, I'm a little bit nervous. I'm not normally someone who can be comfortable running with like 1 or 2 trades, especially in round 27 or 26 when I think there could be restings. So yeah, just going to have to be really, really tactical about when I use trades. And Reece Walsh also owes me for the next fortnight of Parramatta and the Rabbitohs at home. I need to get a combined 300 points from him in this fortnight. Otherwise, it wouldn't have paid off because I would have got Edwards last week. But anyway, let's get into everything. I've got a poll running as well on topics to cover, second row forwards, Edwards, matchups analysis, which I think as we continue in the run home, there'll be more focus on captaincy matchup analysis because, there are fewer trades, so less ability to trade in players. It's more about your sit v starts. And then I've got hooker as another topic to cover as well. Like, Blayke Brailey, of course, is a very popular trade in this week as well. So let's get into some of the chat. So quickly for round 21 TLT. So I've made this post already, but just quickly wrapping up some of the key ins and outs. So Cam Munster is out for the Storm again. That's another thing that's going to hurt me this week because I've got him and King Tongia. So not a great backup, and Munster is out, but for very fair reasons. He's attending his father's funeral. So of course I'm not going to, whinge about it. There's much bigger things happening in the world, but he's out for this week. Still no Pappenhausen. So that's 4 weeks in a row now out with this calf strain. So of course anyone who's held Pappy, which I think is about 22% of the top 5%, absolutely I think you need to move on if you didn't already. I know some people just held on to him just to see if he would come back this week. I was very much in the camp last week. If you sell him for Edwards, I sold him the week before that when he was ruled out for the second week in a row for Walsh. I think you've just got to cut your losses here and move him on. That does mean Kane Bradley's on the bench though with all these changes, and that's not great. It's a bit of an auto emergency nightmare that could affect potentially vice captaincy loops. So, but we'll keep an eye on team lists. Maybe he gets cut because he was named last week, but then end up getting cut. Roosters, Sanders Smith is in for Chad Townsend, which I think anyone who watched that game last week against the Sharks, there was no way that Chad was, I think, surviving this week. Hugo Savala is in the extended reserve, so maybe if he pulls through, he could take that spot of Sanders Smith, but for now it's Sanders Smith. Billy Smith is also out with his head knock, and Sua Wong is in for Victor Radley. For the Cowboys, Tom Duffy's named at 5'8", Purdue's in the centres, and they've got Robert Derby back in on the wing for Jackson Paulo. Now, that's good for Drinkwater. So, no Clifford yet. So, there must be something obviously going on a little bit more serious with his quad. But at least that Purdue's in the centres and Duffy at 5'8" gives me a bit more hope that Drinkwater's going to perform well this week. And he's actually probably one of the better vice captain or captaincy options for this round as well. So, this news of Purdue in the centres does elevate the scoring potential for Drinkwater this week. Nothing much happening for the Dragons. They're not really overly Supercoach relevant, but you've got Corey Allen on the wing. And Fingay in the centres position. Obviously no Val Holmes anymore. For the Broncos off their bye, you've got Payne Haas named, so he's back after his kind of 2 weeks rest. And Jesse Arthurs is also back for them. Mitch Moses is back for the Eels, so that's going to be really, really good for hopefully like a Zach Lomax. You've got Iongi out though for 4 weeks, so Joash Papali'i I think is named at fullback, and Hopgood at prop. This should be good. I didn't really talk about him last week at all, but someone like a Charlie Geimer, who's a bit of a downgrade option maybe in second or forward if you are looking at trying to free up money by selling your Koloamatangis, your Tinos, your Britton... No, I wouldn't sell Britton Nikora, but, if you're still holding on to a Dylan Lucas, if you're trying to free up money, someone like a Charlie Geimer could be an option because Kautonga's out for the season now with that syndesmosis. So someone like a Charlie Geimer who's actually had really good base stats in the last fortnight, he could be an option as a bit of a cheeky downgrade because Hopgood's also been named at prop, so that helps facilitate that. Of course, Tino's out for reported 3 to 4 weeks. Given that we've only got 6 weeks left in the season, really, there is a risk that he doesn't come back for the rest of the season. And you've got Nickel Klukstad back for the Warriors as well. For the Panthers, this is one of the bigger news for the week. You've got Nathan Cleary and Isaiah Yeo named back from their resting last week. Isaac Tungo is also back, so Paul Alamotti is out. No Scott Sorensen, so I don't know what's happening there. I haven't seen any news about it, because some people were looking at him as maybe a bit of a point of difference second row forward, but that's not likely to be the case. Nothing really overly happening at the Tigers. They had one change in their team, I can't remember, but nothing overly Supercoach relevant. Rabbitohs, obviously no Kolomatangi for the remainder of the season, which is a big blow for Supercoach. Not Joe Gray, that's an autocorrect, Jai Gray. He's been named at fullback, so he's returned for them. So that sees Alex Johnston go back to the wing. He has actually had some good numbers at fullback, but it's weird. The Rabbitohs have got a good draw, but no massively standing out Supercoach options just with all their injuries. Jesse Ramian is back for the Sharks, which is good for anyone who maybe held on to him. Honestly, my advice this week is if you have Sharks players, you play them this week against the Rabbitohs. They are absolutely the team to target now, I think, for the run home. Brett Nicker is out with a HAA, which is not great for my own squad. Seb Chris out for the Raiders, so Simi Sasangi's moved to centre, and Knights minimal change. I've noted here that Dane Gagai has been named. The reason for that was that he was having a bit of a cork issue at the back end of the game against the Warriors, which was one of the most ridiculous endings I've ever seen. So I just wanted to call out that he has been named and should be fine to play. For the Bulldogs, Bronson Cherry is back and Rinikama is out. So he was a bit of a cheapy centre that people were looking at for a downgrade, but he's been ruled out this week. And for Manly, Homoli Olukwatu returns. So some people might be looking at him as a second row forward replacement. And you also have Turbo still at right centre. So Manly have been winning games with him at centre. So they're continuing that experiment. We don't really know when I think that's going to change, but as long as they keep winning games, I don't think anything's overly going to change there. I just like that. That is good for Garrick. I think Garrick on the left wing, it's a good spot for him, Supercoach-wise. So there were a few TLT things I wanted to call out. And let's just quickly check in on the chat before we get into everything else. I'm seeing... what are we seeing? Ben McGregor saying, had my best placed round of the season thanks to Edwards' captaincy, of course. Oh, God, this hurts my soul. I got $13.99 last round thanks to Captain Edwards. Okay, I've got to stop reading these Edwards comments because they're really hurting me. Blayke is saying, is Tino a hold? That is really, really team dependent because it depends on your trade situation. If you've got like maybe 7 to 8 trades, you can probably afford to, flip him out. I think completely fine because even when he comes back, it's only really 2 or 3 weeks left in the year. You might need to worry about him. And of course, he's not someone who's going to score these massive 130 40s that you really need to be scared of. So he's absolutely could be a hold. If he's only linking, say, a second row forward, front row forward duel, it could be a useful hold just for that as well. Of course, you need to make sure you've got the depth to cover. Peter saying 148th this week with a 1480. Jesus. Now ranked 5,016. So that's a huge week, Peter. So congrats on that. And Michael saying, what do you think about trading at Teddy to Edwards? We will talk about that as well. A lot of questions as well about Isaiah Yeo and Pat Carrigan, so we'll talk about second row forward. I'm going to finish this little bit with Benny G's comment. Are we all in agreement that last week's score didn't happen and we can forget all about it? Absolutely. What happened last week? I don't know. I think Brett Nicker got a head knock. That's all I remember happening last week. So let's get into a topic I wanted to cover before getting into the specific player stuff. And I did this for myself, to be honest, as a bit of a way to make sure I focus on, with my very, very few trades left, which is 5. I've just been hit with so many injuries. Where do you want to be using your trades and how do you want to be managing them? Because as you saw last week with Dylan Edwards, I have to say his name again, the big 173, those are the scores that you really need to be trying to capitalize on, especially with the captaincy as well, to make the biggest rank jumps in the rest of the run home. And of course, there's so many trades happening this week at second row forward, which makes complete sense due to all the injuries. But what I've just got on screen here, this is courtesy of NRL SuperCoach Stats, godly website, which I love. This is the top scores player-wise for each of the last 3 years. So you've got 23, 24, and so far in 2025. Now, I've spoken about this last week, and I think even the week before, about when do generally these really, really big scores occur in the SuperCoach season. It is typically towards the back end of the year because you've got teams like, say, mounting injuries, no motivation, they're out of the running for a top 8. So like the Rabbitohs, for example. Other teams I'd group in there could be someone like the Eels, the Titans, and then other matchups which teams that are a bit weaker defensively, the Dragons, the Cowboys. those are the teams you really want to be targeting at this point in the year. You want to be identifying those teams that really don't have much to play for. And then which positions do you want to be targeting with your trades as well? So these make it very, very obvious. The absolute monster big SuperCoach scores every year will generally always happen for your backs, like your fullbacks, your centers, your halves, and even your 5/8s to an extent. So if you look at 2023, for example, the other point I wanted to mention, it's generally the backline players with these big scores, and it is normally towards the end of seasons where you see these humongous scores occurring. This is why I think with your trades, you just need to be really, really tactical with, you can go someone like Koloamatangi to like an Angus Crichton, for example, if that's maybe a trade you want to be doing. But if you've got depth to cover Koloamatangi and you might have a guy who can score 50 versus Angus is maybe 60, 65, but you keep that trade up your sleeve and you identify a week where you can go and chase someone like a Dylan Edwards last week. If Cleary goes down again and Edwards has got the Titans next week and he's goal kicking, you're like, well, instead of that trade I used on Angus Crichton, I'll make an extra trade to get an Edwards who could go absolutely nuclear, or targeting someone like a Drinkwater with a really good matchup, or a Tedesco. And they always happen towards the back end of the year. So if we look at 2023, of course, the infamous game was Manly against the Tigers in round 27, where Kola went 188, biggest score of the entire season, and Olukwatu went 177. In round 18, you had Kalen Ponga go 180. You also had Tom Dearden go 179. And then if you can follow my cursor, you can see kind of up until, say, maybe round... look, all the scores north of 148 in 2023. These are the rounds that they're coming in: 27, 22, 23, 18, 27, 26, 22, 25. They're all happening towards the end of the year. And the positions are center wings, halfbacks, center wings, 5/8, halfbacks. Obviously Cleary, Hines were the obvious candidates there. But it's just kind of driving home the point that these are the positions you want to be using your trades on. And these are the rounds to be trying to identify those kind of matchups. If I looked at 2024, of course, Jerome Hughes went monster with that 187. That happened in round 27. Herbie Farnworth got his 176 in round 26. Cleary in round 21, 175. Turbo, 174 in round 20. Again, if you look at all these scores that happen, after 150, so many of them happen in 26, 16, 25, and then even from 160 plus scores, 26, 21, 27, 20, 21. Again, just kind of reiterating the point that this is generally where you do find the big scores to really happen. And for this year's, obviously, we haven't got to that point in the year yet. But if you look at the positions where these guys are scoring the big points, it's all in the backs. There's only one second row forward score that's in the top scores so far this season, and that was Dylan Lucas when he scored that. Did he score a double or he scored a hat-trick? And that was in round 12. Otherwise, every other big score this year has come from a fullback or a centre, or Kale Weeks, I guess, at 5'8", but he was playing at fullback on the day. So I think this is probably pretty well known to most of you watching, but I just think it's good to kind of reiterate it, just to look at this and say, well, hold on. If I want to hold out for these huge 140, 150 point scores, focus the trades on the backline players and identify those matchups and those weeks where you can make those trades. Like last week, I think was a perfect example. And this is why, I know I couldn't get him in, but this is why I was so keen on people selling Pappy to Edwards, because it was one of those weeks where I thought he would be goal kicking, which he did. No Cleary, where he knows average is better. And the Rabbitohs actually had a tendency to leak points to opposing fullbacks and tries. So again, that's identifying the matchup, identifying the opportunity, and best captaincy in my opinion. So hopefully I can try and make more of those calls in the weeks ahead, and hopefully I can jump on them as well, rather than tell people and not do it myself. But I just wanted to frame this for the week, and this will be something that we keep talking about for the remaining rounds, just because you really want to be making sure you're very tactical with your trades and where you're spending them. And especially this week, I wanted to say that because there are a lot of trades happening at the 2RF position, which I think is completely fine. But just maybe ask yourself, do I need to use that trade on a 2RF if it means that, if I need to roll out another guy in my squad who can maybe get within 10 to 20 points of that 2RF that I'm buying, but if I can keep that trade or two up my sleeve to target matchups like this where guys are going 150, 60 plus, it's obviously way more valuable of a trade to do that. So just wanted to mention that. This was obviously, after having some reflection on Sunday evening, not even Sunday, it was Friday when it happened. I thought, this was maybe a topic I wanted to cover. But yeah, of course, this is obviously in an ideal world, you're able to target these matchups. You can't always do it. But again, this is, I think, to me, this is how I would like to use my trades in the run home. It's exactly why I went Pappy to Reece Walsh when he had the Titans, because I thought that's a matchup where he can go 130. Obviously, it didn't pan out. He scored 80, but also he had a good couple of games coming after that. So I just have to hope that keep playing that way, keep trying to be aggressive, and just get lucky with injuries, because obviously if you've got the ability to navigate injuries and do that, that's the best position. If you just keep copying injuries, then of course you have to deal with them. So I get that. But anyway, that's some of my thoughts on just, I guess, trying to, call it trade strategy. That's what I wanted to talk about. In saying all of that, let's quickly look. I'm going to end the poll. So the number one topic to cover is the second row forward. So let's talk about second row forwards, and then we'll circle back to the Edwards chat. So of course, so many injuries. Koloamatangi. I wouldn't be selling Britton Nicker this week, but I know he's obviously someone who's out this week, so people are trying to cover him. People are still selling Dylan Lucas, Tino Fusumalawi. Top three trade-outs are all second row forwards. So who are the best options? On this table, I've left out Eli Katoa just because I assumed he is so highly owned. I figured there's no point even putting him on here. Most people already own him. Now, if you don't own Eli Katoa, then I think he's probably your obvious candidate. In terms of the guys who are getting purchased in the second row forward position, Hudson Young is topping it out. He's currently the most popular trade-in at the 2RF position. And if you actually, I'm going to refer to this a bit more as well. If you look at coaches ranked in the top 5%, and if you look at who they're trading in at the second row forward position, Hudson Young is number one. Pat Carrigan is the second. Zay Yo is the third. And Aaron Clark is fourth. Angus is fifth. And Ol Kawatu is actually sixth now. So he's actually moved up the list there in terms of, second row forward trade-ins. So I think for me, so to answer, say, William's question here of Yo or Carrigan from Koloamatangi. Now, they're very much the same kind of player, right? They're very meat and potatoes, all base stats. And shout out as well to the SC Ballers. So one thing I've included from their website, which I'd highly recommend you head over to, because they've added more and more tools on their website. And one thing I found really, really useful is in this row here of the 5-round average base power. So you're able to sort players by their 3-round and also their 5-round average in base power, which I thought was obviously very useful for something like the second row forward position. So that's what I've got on screen. Then I've got that from SC Ballers. So definitely check out that website. It's ballr.live. Carrigan's got a 5-round base power average of 59, which I think is on the slightly lower end because he had a game in their post-origin where he played lower minutes. Azayo's 60. So they're very, very similar. Yo's about 40k cheaper. If I was looking at one of Yo or Carrigan, I think I'd probably take the chance on Azayo. One is a little bit cheaper. I think he's got a similar floor to Carrigan. I think Carrigan's floor is probably slightly higher. But I just feel like with the draw that Penrith have got, and I think wanting to get him up and running for the remainder of the finals, I think there's a good chance that Azayo goes back to what he did in the kind of last year, where he was like a low 70s averaging player, and he was getting it more and more attacking stats. Now, granted, this year, I think with the lack of Jerome Luai, he is playing a role where he's not getting as many attacking stats. So whether or not he gets those attacking stats, remains to be seen. But I think if I think of SC pedigree, I'd say he's probably got a little bit more pedigree than a Pat Carrigan. And the fact that he's a bit cheaper, he's playing for a better team in Penrith. I think he's probably the one who I'd be leaning towards. There maybe is a risk of another resting round 26, round 27, which could make you think, okay, play the safe option and go Carrigan, because Carrigan's been putting up really strong numbers all season long. Season average is 68. He's probably not going to really ever go but more than 80. He's probably not really ever going to go less than 60. So he's very, very consistent. So I think if you're maybe concerned about potential resting for an Isaiah Yo, then I'd just say get Carrigan. But if you're willing to take that punt, because I think it is a bit more of a punt with Isaiah Yo because his season performance hasn't been up to Carrigan's level, I think Isaiah Yo may potentially get more of those attacking stats. And he's got some really good matchups coming up this week against the Tigers. Then he's got the Titans next week as well. I'd be pretty happy with taking a punt on Isaiah Yo over Carrigan, but I think you just need to be wary that there could be some potential restings. Now, neither of these two guys would be my preferred second or forward trade-in though, because again, we're talking about guys who are very meat potatoes, very safe. And I think we want to be chasing those upside scores. And if I refer back to the screen with the high upside, the biggest scores in the last 3 years. If you see any 2RFs, they're all edge back rowers. Carrigan and Azayo are players in the middle. If you look at 2023, the highest back row score was from Olakwatu. He's an edge player. And then you had Lachlan Fitzgibbon, surprisingly, also an edge back rower. 2024, the highest score from a second row forward was Angus Crichton, playing on an edge. And he's the only one actually there. And then this year, the only one was Dylan Lucas, again, an edge back rower. I think your edge back rowers is where I'd be looking at my trade-ins, just because I think they're more likely to get those bigger attacking stats like your tries and line breaks. So I think that would still be my choice over an Azayo or Pat Carrigan. Hudson Young probably is the obvious one because of what he's done so far of the year. He's got an average of 80. He scored 65 on the weekend, and that was without any attacking stats, so pretty much all in base power, so good floor. He does have the bye coming up in round 24, which is one thing you will need to consider. But I think if you can make the money work, he is someone who can score tons. I think he scored the most tons out of any 2RF last year. And we obviously know early in the season, he was going I think there was a 3-week period where he went 3 tons in a row. So good draw as well. He's got the Knights this week. I'm just going to quickly remind myself of the Raiders draw. So just bear with me for a second. Apologies. Where is the Raiders draw? Here we go. You got the Knights, Dragons, Manly, and then the bye. Then it's Penrith, Tigers, and Dolphins. Apart from Penrith in 25, it's a pretty good run home for the Raiders. And I think the fact that he played the full 80 minutes, got good work rate under him last week, means that I'm a little bit less concerned about the osteitis pubis. Obviously you got to see him play a full game and he came out of it unscathed. So I think Hudson Young would, for me, he'd be my number one choice, I think, as a second row forward trade-in for your Colomatungis or Tinos. I just think he has one of the bigger upsides of the guys on the list here. Nikora would have been the one I would have suggested if he was playing against the Rabbitohs. And, I bought Nikora last week because I had the belief that he was good for this draw. It's just unfortunate with, getting that early head knock and not being available this week. You obviously can't trade in Nikora this week with that, the fact that he's not playing. But I think next week, again, if you didn't love Hudson Young because he has got a high break even of 117, you could wait a week and then maybe instead get Nikora next week because the Sharks draw is unreal. Obviously, you're missing the Bunnies this week, but you've still got very, very good games coming up. And Nikora's $5.99K, so he's a lot more affordable. Just seeing if there's any otly questions. Firstly, I have to give a quick shout out. Thank you to Martin Lau for the donation. Very, very much appreciated. And paying for my coffee tomorrow when I head into work. VC Carapani, Cleary, Edwards for the big C. Ooh, okay. We're taking an early call on captaincy. We'll talk about captaincy later. Cleary, Edwards for the big C. I think Cleary. I still think if Cleary's in the team, I need to know about the goal kicking. That's the thing. Some part of me still thinks Cleary though. Cleary's got the I keep saying it, pedigree. I think he's got the pedigree. Tool Pro saying no Zach Hosking. Look, Hosking's actually been really good the last 3 weeks. My only concern is that Manny Nicholson will come back at some point. And then I think he'll be on a lower minutes. And I don't know if you just want to be messing around with that at this point in the year. There is actually a fair few trade-ins for Zach Hosking, but I just feel like if you can get the money to work, I will just buy a Hudson Young instead. I think he's the play I'd be going for in that Raiders forward pack. Of course, I haven't spoken about him. He is the second most traded in player. Or third most traded in actually. It's Payne Haas. So who makes the point here? It is Blue Moon saying, surely you just move Keon to front row forward and trade to Haas. Way more reliable. Absolutely. So I will say that if you haven't got Payne Haas, the fact that he's back this week, if you sold him during the Origin period, absolutely, he would be my priority forward trade-in. Payne Haas above any of these guys on the list here, just based on what he's done this year. I think he's actually, him or Taylor May, I think are the highest averaging players this season. He should be hopefully, well rested after his 2 weeks off, managing that back issue. You absolutely trade to Payne Haas above all of these other second row forwards, in my opinion. Barring maybe an Eli Katoa, but assuming you've got Katoa, absolutely go Colomatungi or Tino or Dylan Lucas to Payne Haas via duels, and I think most people should have the duels to get someone like a Payne Haas. But yeah, you make a good point, Blue Moon. You definitely get Payne Haas above all these other guys. That'd be a given for me, to be honest. Like the video, or your captain will cop an HIA. SC gods are fickle. Yeah, please like the video. I wouldn't wish a early HIA on my worst enemy after experiencing it last week, especially when Oh, it was the worst circumstance because it was Connor Watson, my hooker, who I thought was about to get a line break assist, try assist, but his wayward pass meant that, was it Angus? Whoever caught it, they had to jump in the air, and then their hip collected Nickera. And so Watson didn't get a try assist, line break assist because of his pass. And then in that subsequent play, he's gone and knocked out my trade-in of Britton Nickera, who I wanted for the next few weeks. And I really wanted him for this Bunnies matchup. And I was watching it on the bus, and I just thought, this is the worst. I said, this is a disaster. Anyway, just going to have my quick rant there. Toolpro says, Angus looks cooked. Yeah, look, in terms of ranking of Angus as a trade-in, yeah, Hudson Young would be over Angus for me. Now, Angus is a good price at $591K, but 5-round average base power of 62, which is good. He's just not passing the eye test for me. He scored 69 last week with a try, but I think it's just like he's not the Angus of 2024. Like Angus of 2024 was having the bull bars up. He was just fending guys non-stop, busting tackles, offloading like crazy. He would just score 75 without any attacking stats, but then he was getting all these attacking stats as well. And clearly with the Roosters, with Sam Walker, they want him to be the dominant half. And so a lot of more of the ball is going down the left. So far though, Angus hasn't benefited. He could, but it's not like the draw is also amazing for the Roosters. So, how many attacking stats will he get? Yeah, my gut feel is that we're not going to get the Angus of last year. I think if you buy Angus, you're probably going to get someone who's going to average between 65 to 70. I don't think you're going to get the guy who was averaging, 75, 80 plus. So I think Angus is a fine trade-in. Look, I would probably still trade in an Angus over Azayo or Pat Carrigan, just because, again, we spoke about it. An edge back row still has upside. I don't know if those middles do, but I'd be trading in a Hudson Young over Angus. With Aaron Clark, again, leaning away from him, I think, a little bit because he had a bit of cramp issue last week and scored 57. His minutes were good. He does have a very good matchup this week against the Titans, his old club. So if you love a narrative, then I think Aaron Clark's actually maybe a good trade in this week. He can get attacking stats, but I feel like he might be kind of someone who caps out at 70 each week. Just thinking of the guys who can go really, really big. I don't know if Aaron Clark fits that bill for me. It's also why I like someone like a Beau Fermor. I know the Titans are a rabble, but he's still pumping out really solid base power. I think he scored 65 last week or 67 without any attacking stats. And we know that he's got that ability to score 100 plus as well. I'd probably buy Angus over Beau Fermor. But yeah, I think Hudson Young would be number 1 for me. Angus number 2. I'd even probably take the punt on a Beau Fermor above maybe an Aaron Clark. Now we'll raise the topic of Olukwatu. So I think someone earlier in the chat, Blake is here in the chat, is saying thoughts on Olukwatu and the risk of re-injury. So of course I'll need to check in with NRL Physio and get his opinion on this because he's more qualified to speak about it than me. But I do feel like, because Olukwatu had a shoulder dislocation, and I think it's a very similar injury to what Dylan Lucas had at one point in the year, where I think that he's fine to play, but there is an injury risk, if he lands on it the same way. And generally with shoulder dislocation, I think on the footy field, it's like when they land on it outstretched. That's what happened with Cleary a couple of years ago as well, when he dislocated his shoulder. And there is a significant re-injury risk with that. I think with Olukwatu, I can't remember his break even, so I'm just going to try to pull it up off the top of my head. Apologies. So my main thought with Olukwatu is you can hopefully wait a week. He's got the Bulldogs. He's got a 72 break even, so it's not like it's super high. If you are looking to make a trade this week and you have to make a trade for numbers, then I would still probably prefer to get like Angus or Fermor or Hudson Young over him. But the draw does open up for Olukwatu. He's at an okay price at 660, but those guys are all a little bit cheaper, and I think Hudson's just got a better draw and has shown better ceiling this year. But we know Olukwatu is one of those guys who can go big, and so he does have an appeal in that sense because he's already scored 3 tons this year, and we saw in 23 he scored that 177 against the Tigers, and their last 4 weeks are really good. Manly, they've got West Tigers, Dolphins at home, Dragons, and then the Warriors at home. So I think Olukwatu is actually a very, very good, pod play. He would have been very, very heavily sold when he got injured. So I don't know how many people would have jumped on him. I actually don't hate it as a bit of a risk to go on him, especially if you're not liking what you're seeing from an Angus or a Beau Fermor. My general suggestion though would be that if you've got the depth, just give it a week. It's the Bulldogs. It's not like it's a fantastic matchup. And if he comes through it unscathed, then maybe you can look to trade him in next week. If you have to make that trade though this week, I'd go Hudson Young first. would I get him over Angus or Fermor? Honestly, I can actually, you know what, I probably will say if you are having to trade in a second or forward this week, just to make the numbers, Hudson 1. I think I maybe will take that risk on Olukwatu just because we know that he's got a ceiling on him. And I think that's what we're just trying to chase in this run home. So I think it's like, I actually think it's worth the gamble, but I will hopefully try to get some more news on his re-injury risk. I'll chat to physio and see what his thoughts are on that one. Fermor had a try assist. Okay, so that probably bumped up his work rate. Yeah, so it's not as great then, but he is someone who's generally at second or forward been pretty solid. A couple of other pods I've got on the list here. Leke Halasima, of course, his heroics. His 515k. I've just got him here because he's got the best draw probably. He plays the Titans twice, including this week. His minutes have always been a bit fluctuating, so it's hard to get a read on that. But he's at an okay price at 515k. And then you've got Jeremiah Nanai, who's 484k, 5-round average of 49. Not for me particularly. And the other thing you need to consider is that he's got the buy in round 27. And if you're already so low on trades, ideally, I think if you're trading in these kind of guys in this mid 500s, you just want to be bringing in guys who I think are going to be available for you in round 27. Unless you're confident that you've got the trades to sell him in 27 or to cover him, I think I wouldn't be looking at him. And I've got Jaden Sewer because he went pretty well 2 weeks ago. But I'm just not overly keen just because of the Dragons in general. And Kikau and Preston, I feel like they're at a point where their good draw is starting to kind of come to an end. They both didn't score that great last week, and I think I wouldn't be buying them if I didn't already own. I know someone in the chat earlier was asking, what about Preston? Look, for me, I just think the Bulldogs have been fine, not as good as earlier in the year. And there'll be games where they probably will get, 70s, 80s, and 90s. I just don't have a great feel for them, I think, and I'd prefer to get like an Angus or a Olukwatu, or definitely a Hudson Young as well. Angus's tough fixtures a turn off a little bit. I mean, it doesn't matter as much for a second or a forward. And look, the Roosters still do have good fixtures on the run home, so it's not like he's a complete avoid. Like, for example, we'll talk about this when we talk about Teddy later, but there are weeks where Angus Crichton is going to be a scary non-own. Like, even Manly next week's not bad. Dolphins is fine. Parramatta in round 25, and then Rabbitohs in round 27. That could be easily, like, Angus Crichton in round 27 against the Rabbitohs could easily score 140 points. Like, that can definitely happen. So, if you think that's a chance, I don't hate just trading in Angus. And this is why I would prefer him to like a Zayo and Pat Carrigan. Just because I think those kind of matchups is where he can go really, really big. And by then, the combination with Sanders Smith, etc., may be a bit more worked out. Maybe he does get all of his attacking stats towards that pointy end of the year. Connolly Lemuelu, look, he scored well last week, but he's on the bye, so we're not going to talk about him probably for now. Missed the Sharks game. Do you know who went to the Snickers Edge and how he scored? I think it was Billy Burns, because I think Billy Burns was on the bench for that game, so I'm just going to quickly check this. Yeah, he played 72 minutes. He scored 72 points, and he scored a try. So, of course, I also missed the second half of that game because I had an event on. He scored a try and scored 72 points. So again, I didn't even know that. That makes the whole Nicker thing even worse now. Bloody hell. Anyway, so that's some of my thoughts. Luke Garner says Yellow Duck. I'm always concerned with roll. But no Scott Sorensen. I don't know what's going on there. I'm actually annoyed because Luke Garner was someone I was looking at like around the bye period. 95 last week, 77, 55, 75. His last 4 scores have been, pretty good. He's played 80 minutes since round 16, except round 17 played 68 minutes, which is fair enough. The numbers say looks good. The numbers do look very good actually for Luke Garner. Let me do some digging into his role a little bit later, and I might reserve judgment on him, but those numbers are good. I actually don't hate that shout. I know it wasn't the second most popular topic, but I will quickly pivot to hooker, because this is one thing that I think people who already own maybe Connor Watson should think about, is if you are trading in a second or a forward, someone like a Blayke Brailey. So of course he's getting fairly heavily traded in this week. In terms of the higher ranks, let me have a quick look at it. He's currently the fourth most traded in player amongst coaches in the top 5%. And I think he's like the fourth most traded in player. He's fifth most traded in player overall. So Blayke Brailey, he's got a 5-round base power average of 62. And compared to the season, that's 50. We've seen, obviously, in the eye test, there's a lot more commentary about his running game. He's running the ball a lot more. And if you just think of that 62 5-round average of base power, that's really similar to, that's the same as Angus. It's the same as Beau Fermor. Same as better than Kickow. Not that different to Hudson Young. So his 5-round base power is on par with a lot of these 2RFs. But he's already scored 3 or 4 tons in the last 5 rounds. And he's arguably got the best draw of any of these guys. And he's got probably the best matchup as well this week in the Rabbitohs. And the Rabbitohs do concede, they can be weak through the middle as well. So if you're comfortable with it, one option is selling Koloamatangi, flip Connor Watson down to your second row forward, and just go Blayke Brailey as your number 1. I actually don't hate that as a strategy. I've looked at that myself. I don't know if I can make the money work. I still think I would prefer Hudson to Blayke Brailey, but I think I'd get Brailey after Hudson in terms of trade-ins because I think the matchups are looking so good the next 4 weeks. The only concern is that you'll need to plan for is that round 25, if you flip Connor Watson down to your second row forward and then maybe you bring in a Blayke Brailey at your number 9 position, in round 25, if you don't have a backup hooker, you might have to take an auto emergency. If you've got Kalani going, though, as your nuffin hooker, and if you flip Connor Watson down, then you're completely fine. Because then in round 25, when Brailey's on the bye, just swap Kalani going and Connor Watson, and then you can have Connor Watson as your hooker in round 25, and then you're completely covered. I think if you were in that boat where you've got Kalani going as your backup hooker, I would seriously consider trading in Blayke Brailey because you're going to be covered for round 25. And I just think the next 4 weeks are ridiculously good. And I'm just trusting the eye test here. I think his running game is looking unreal. A 5-round average of 94, prime matchups. I think this is one of those times where in SuperCoach in the past, I've not been good at identifying when players have just changed their game. We think of Blayke Brailey as always someone who's averaging around the high 50s, but there's been a definite shift in his game. And so I don't want to say, he's not a trade-in. I know he's very expensive. He's $700K, which feels gross. But for example, Harry Grant at $544 is $150K cheaper. But if you've got the money, I would just say get Brailey at this point. His draw's better. His upside looks better. I know Harry Grant didn't score that try last week when he should have. Just Nelson, did what he did. And then maybe it's a different discussion. But I just think the way that the Sharks are playing, the way that he's playing with their draw, I think he's honestly a very, very good trade-in. And the 5-round base power average of 62, it's on par with a lot of these second row forwards as well. So I know there wasn't too many questions about Brailey, but just wanted to throw it out there as well in that you've got the ability to trade him in via duels. If you've already got a Connor Watson, of course, if you haven't, then it's a little bit more difficult. But this is one thing I wanted to suggest to people who own Watson at hooker, and if you're trading a second row forward. Starling for the win at hooker. Yeah, if you've owned Tom Starling, then you're happy with about that. You obviously just need to make sure you've got cover in round 24. I think that's when the Raiders have the bye. I've put Wade Egan on the list here as well. If you are looking for a bit of a point of difference hooker, plays the Titans this week and again in round 25. But I think though for $474, I would just pay that little $70K extra and get Harry Grant. But if you're flush with cash, Blayke Brailey is absolutely who I'd be getting at hooker. I'm gonna say I was wrong in that week where everyone was buying Connor Watson, because Connor Watson's, he's just been a safe kind of 50 to 60. But I think when we're trying to chase ceiling, Blayke Brailey is showing much more of that, and he's a genuine pod. He's only 21% owned in the top 5% as well. So really like Blayke Brailey as a shout, and if I can make the money work, I might even look to trade him in myself this week because I'm that keen on his draw coming up. All right, that's all I want to talk about on hooker. I'm trying to remember what the run order was for the poll. I'm pretty sure it was Edwards and fullback. So let's talk about that. Isaiah Papali'i. No, I'm not sure if I'd be that keen on Isaiah Papali'i. Martin saying that's my exact trade for this week. I assume if that's Koloamatangi to Blayke Brailey, then I don't hate that. Okay, on fullback. So got some stats below me on Teddy. Firstly, on Drinkwater, I think obviously no one's really trading him. I think you just have to hold him. Got a good draw up until round 27. Ideally, I'm going to try to keep a trade up my sleeve though, because he's got the buy in round 27. And as you can see on the table, Edwards has got the Dragons in 27. Teddy's got the Rabbitohs. Turbo's got the Warriors. Pappy's got the Broncos. Just depending on what happens that week, in terms of restings. Because let's say Penrith rests Nathan Cleary in round 27. You will want Dylan Edwards goal kicking against the Dragons in 27. So just be mindful of trying to keep a trade up your sleeve for managing Drinkwater. Up until then, though, I think he's completely fine. Now, Teddy is one of the more sold players this week. He's been a bit disappointing. Last week, obviously, only scored 37. But I just want to temper I just want to cool the Teddy sell chat. So I don't think Teddy is a sell. I just think our expectations of Teddy are so high that when he doesn't consistently score like over 100, I think we're automatically like, oh, this isn't great. And especially it's reactionary when if you didn't own Edwards, he scores 173, you're thinking, bloody hell, I've got to trade the guy who just scored 37 for the guy who just scored 173. And of course, the draw is not good overall, but there are some good matchups that I'd be very scared of not owning Teddy. Manly, Dolphins, Parramatta, and Rabbitohs. Like Rabbitohs in round 27, he could be the best captain of the week. And look, I've got 5 traders left. I don't think I've got the ability to trade him out and then trade him back in. He's a warm body. He's Teddy. He's got pedigree. I think I'm just going to stick with him. And the whole thing about, with Sam Walker coming back, it has disrupted the Roosters to an extent. Like if you look below, up until the time that Sam Walker was in the team, he was averaging 88.5. In the 2 games with Sam Walker, 60.5. But that's only a 2-game sample. In the first game, he still did score 84 against the Dragons. He got that late try assist, but he still scored 84. And he scored 77 against the Tigers, which was very much helped out with a late try. So you do need to account for that. But if you look at his scores, apart from that 37, 84, 77, 107, 97, 91. Those are his 5 scores before the 37. And the Sharks over the season have been the best at actually defending opposing fullbacks. So last week just wasn't the matchup. When we talk about matchups later, Melbourne can leak points on their wings. So that can be good for a Teddy this week. And on Edwards, if you wanted to do Teddy to Edwards. So Edwards without Cleary is amazing. Average, and the numbers I've got there is over the last 2 seasons. So it includes this season, but also 2024. With Cleary, his average is 74. Without Cleary, his average is 97. Sorry, I've got those 2 things mixed up. That should be actually saying Cleary, and that should say no Cleary. Apologies. I'm just going to quickly change that so it's clear. But yeah, so without Cleary, his average is 97 over the last couple of seasons. Base stats don't really change, but his scoring average goes from 7 to 22. Makes sense because he picks up the goal kicking. His create average goes from 13 to 17, which also makes sense. He's a bit more dominant, a bit more try assists. And his evasive numbers go from 19 to 25. Not quite sure what explains that. Maybe he just takes more runs potentially and gets more tackle busts. But I think the fact that Cleary's been named this week, it's very tough to say who's going to be picking up the goal kicking because Edwards is a good goal kicker. My guess is 60% chance Edwards kicks, 40% chance Cleary doesn't kick because I think the fact that the week before last, when Cleary came off the bench, then he got the rest last week, they're obviously clearly trying to manage him. Is he fully fit to kick? I don't know yet. I just don't know. And it's a good matchup against the West Tigers. But the West Tigers haven't been that bad to opposing fullbacks, apart from Ryan Pappenhausen, when he scored 182. Look, Teddy to Edwards, I wouldn't do it. I know it sucks because of what Edwards just did and the negative break even, but I think Teddy, he's still got really good games in the future that I'd be terrified to not own. And I think we just need to, calm the farm a little bit on, selling Teddy. I know he hasn't looked good on the eye, but Toolpro saying, Teddy and Markey both look cooked. Do we sell? I don't think Teddy is cooked. I think Teddy is fine. It's just... the Sharks are a good team against fullbacks. And that game against the West Tigers I was at that game. We didn't have our origin players, the Roosters. We just didn't look that good in general. Sam Walker wasn't even playing that week. So I think we can explain the last couple of rounds. And yeah, like Teddy got 20 points in base power. That's like, I think Whisper tweeted that that's his lowest base power score since like 2020. I think it's a bit of an anomaly, a bit of a write-off. I wouldn't be selling Teddy. Up until then, Teddy was still the man that most people wanted at fullback. Yeah, Blue Moon makes a good point. I feel like the Roosters right side are getting no ball with Walker back. That is absolutely happening. So that is affecting Mark Nwangani Tawasi. But Teddy can float both sides of the field, so I still think Teddy's going to be okay. Pappenhausen, so he's not named this week. I think you definitely sell this week. I think the big question is for people selling Pappenhausen this week, do you go Edwards or Cleary? Me personally, I think I'd just go get Cleary, because even if Cleary doesn't goal kick this week, I'd wager that he picks up the goal kicking next week against Titans. And then all of a sudden, Cleary goal kicking versus the Titans next week in 22, prime captaincy option. So I think if I was in the position of selling Pappy this week, I'd probably just get Cleary. Even if he doesn't kick this week, I would try to just, plan in advance of wanting to get him ahead of the Titans when I think he will be goal kicking. If you've already got Cleary in your halves, or if you're looking for another fullback, I think Reece Walsh should be the one I'd be looking at this week. So he's got Parramatta and the Rabbitohs back-to-back at Suncorp, which I think are two of the best matchups for a fullback. So that's why I said before, Walsh, I need about 300 points from you over the next couple of weeks to try to recover what I lost on Edwards. Because Walsh, the last couple of seasons, has been like an 80 averaging player when you take out his kind of injuries and whatnot. He needs to do a lot to get his attacking stats, that's for sure. But those next 2 weeks, I think, are really, really good for him at Suncorp. And he's a massive pod, 7% owned in the top 5%. Turbo's looked really, really good actually at right centre. He's a 630k. He's got a low break even of 15. But I think if you're trying to target matchups, Bulldogs, Roosters, Canberra, it still doesn't quite feel like that's the time. I think 24 onwards is when I'd maybe be revisiting Turbo. So I think in summary, I wouldn't sell Teddy. If I'm selling Pappy this week, I'd probably go and get Cleary, I think, rather than Edwards. Next 3 games for Edwards could destroy your season if you're a non-owner. I think if look, put it this way, if there was no Cleary next 3 weeks and Edwards was goal kicking all 3 weeks, as those numbers below suggest about his average without Cleary, 100% he could end your season. And don't get it wrong, Edwards is still good with Cleary. Like, his average is 74 in the last couple of seasons. He's still very, very good. I just don't think he's that massive. Like, you're not going to get, I think, in my opinion, those 170 scores with Cleary in the team. And I hope to God he doesn't do it again after me just saying that. With Cleary back, I feel less scared of him. Last week was scary though, because I knew that his average is always better with Cleary. That's why I said to everyone, go buy him last week. But yeah, this week I think it's different. Yeah, just with the Roosters this week as well, with Sanders Smith, I would suspect that, I don't know how it's going to play out. I would think that Sam Walker goes back to the right-hand side and Sanders Smith goes on the left. And that's where Teddy was doing well all season long, when Sanders Smith was on the left-hand side. So look, Teddy could still actually do just fine against Melbourne this week. Again, Melbourne aren't like 100% star-studded. There's no Munster and there's no Pappenhausen this week. So that matchup could also be okay for Tedesco this week. Lachlan says, I'm an Edwards owner and I can't get Cleary without selling a green dot gun. Green dot meaning an active player who's playing. Teddy/Hughes for what it's worth. So let's quickly chat about that on the halfbacks, because I think obviously Cleary is one of the most traded in players this week. He's the second most traded in behind Edwards. Look, I would, as I just said, I would take Cleary, I think, over Edwards. Cleary so far this year has averaged 82.6 without his injuries. Edwards this year is averaging 82, but of course that 173 is massively impacting that. I would like to think that Cleary is more likely going to average that 83 compared to Edwards' 82. 38% owned in the top ranks. And I think non-injury, Cleary is still the best halfback. 82.6, Hines is 74.2, and Hughes is 74. Now, the big question is, do you sell a Hughes or a Hines to Cleary this week if you wanted to, or even in the coming weeks? And personally, I can't do it. Not as it currently stands, because Hines and Hughes are still performing very well. I've crunched the numbers. Hughes without Munster, I don't have the numbers actually on screen here, but generally without Munster in the last couple of seasons, he's also averaged over 80. He's coming up against the Roosters, who haven't obviously been crash hot defensively in the last few weeks. And on this screen, I've got those 3 halfbacks draw for the rest of the year. And in the table below, that's the ranking of the opposing team in terms of conceding points to halfbacks, sort of for the last 5 rounds. So it's looking at more recently which teams have conceded the most points to opposing halfbacks. And I've added that for the draw for the halfbacks. So Hines clearly stands out. In the next 4 weeks, he's versing the Bunnies, who are 1st, Cowboys are 8th, Dragons are 9th, and Titans are 6th. So they're all pretty good opponents. So the draw looks amazing for the next 4. For Cleary, he's got 11th for the Tigers, 6th for the Titans, 12th for the Knights, and then 14th for Melbourne. So even that Titans matchup, if you look at that week, because to me, that's the week that feels the scariest, I think, not having Cleary against the Titans. But Hines is versing the Cowboys at home, I think. There's no way you're probably selling Hines. And then Hughes has got Parramatta, who have been the 3rd worst at defending against opposing halfbacks. I just can't see myself selling Hines or Hughes if they're still in form for Cleary. Whilst I think Cleary is going to outscore them, if he outscores them by, if we go by, say, these season averages here, if he outscores them by, say, 5 to 10 points a game for the rest of the year, we're looking at 50 points. Now, of course, bigger variance could occur, and maybe that difference is bigger. But if I play the averages and I think it's maybe 50 to 60 points, I think I'm willing to cop that if I can save that trade and make other moves. Now, I could get to next week and think I'm a coward. I'm going to get Cleary in, especially if he looks really good this week and he's goal kicking. Against the Titans, he will be one of the best captaincy options. But Hines and Hughes are just looking so good. So to your point, Lachlan, it's really, really hard to try to get Cleary in when you've got these other halves in your team who are performing well. Like Hines and Hughes have got good 5-round averages. Hines is 85, Hughes is 79. And yeah, Cleary's been good this year, but he hasn't been as good as in previous years. And given that he's coming off this rest, he's been niggling groin issue. As it currently stands, I'm probably going to not getting Cleary, which doesn't feel great. Look, if I was a Pappy owner, absolutely I'd be selling for Cleary. But I think for me, yeah, it feels tough to try to get him in. Tim Allen has gifted 5 memberships. Thank you so much for that. Appreciate that a lot. That's very, very good. Give Tim a big shout out in the chat to anyone who's been given that. Reese says, first week I've overtaken you in overall. Never thought it would happen, but here we are. Look, a lot of people would have overtaken me this week after the week that I had. I had an absolute shocker. Lachlan saying, I can see Hughes getting a rest next week, which would give me excuse to buy Cleary. Look, if Hughes gets a rest next week, I will sell him for Cleary because that's just the most gift-wrapped trade to do. But yeah, while he's playing, just with the draw that's coming up, I think I'll be keeping on to Hughes and Hines. Maybe there's an argument for Hughes out come round 24 because then if you look at the draw there, his difficulty of opponents does increase quite dramatically. But again, this is the thing, context for every game. The Storm always beat up the Broncos. So they play them in round 23 and round 27. The Roosters in round 26. I don't think that's a terrible matchup. It's only maybe Penrith and the Dogs in round 24, 25. But yeah, look, like for example, if I look at round 27, Hines to Cleary might be the play. Hines has the Bulldogs. Cleary's got the Dragons. So again, I think it's going to be one of these things where I think we really just have to play it week to week because as soon as you maybe get an injury or if one of these guys drops a stinker or doesn't look very good, then I think you just have to be ready to maybe pull the trigger to bring in a Cleary. But as it currently stands, Hughes and Hines are looking very good. I don't think there's any reason to have to sell them for Cleary. So yeah, it makes the Cleary trade-ins tough. If you've got the ability to move him in at flex, I would do that over a fullback this week. If I wanted to wrap up that discussion about trade-ins for Pappy, just because I know people might be selling Pappy at flex, yeah, Cleary would be my number one. I would probably still take an Edwards over Reece Walsh this week just because the next 3 weeks are good for Edwards, whereas I think for Walsh it's only his next 2. And there's a chance that Edwards gets the goal kicking this week. And then Walsh would probably be my third trade in at flex if we're talking between the fullbacks and the halfbacks. But yeah, that's some of my thoughts on that one. I've got a slide on 5'8", but I haven't seen that many questions about 5'8" coming into this week. we'll talk about that maybe if other people have questions about it. I won't specifically address it because I know some people have looked at maybe like a Lockie Galvin. He's not featuring that higher up though in the trades, so I might just skip over the 5/8 and we'll pivot to the matchup analysis because I think this is a bit more interesting. Luke has also gifted another 5 memberships, so thank you, Luke and Tim. That's very, very generous of both of you. So yeah, guys, give your send your appreciation to those who in the chat. That's a very, very generous of them. Both legends. Any dual changes? Will Turbo get dual? Nah, there'll be no more dual position changes this year. They all finished in round 18. All right, let's talk about some matchups for round 21. And we'll try to focus on this a bit more for the run home as well. So this is courtesy of NRL Tryline, so it's effectively like a try map. And hopefully you can see this. The numbers might be a little bit small, but what I've written below me is things that stood out to me. So things that stand out: Storm, wingers, and fullback. So unfortunately, I thought Papu could have been an option, but probably not. But if you look at the Roosters, they've conceded 12 tries to opposing right wingers, 9 tries to opposing left wingers, and 9 tries to opposing fullbacks. So for the Roosters, it really looks as though it's on the edges, and then the fullback, with the sweeping plays, that's where they can be a bit suspect. So, some point of differences could be someone like Xavier Coates, who scored well last week, and who else would be on the right-hand side? I can't even remember, Grant Anderson, but I don't think they're going to be that highly owned. I have highlighted Roosters wingers though. So Melbourne have conceded, let me find it here. They've conceded 13 tries to opposing right wingers, 12 tries to opposing left wingers. So that potentially could be good for someone like a Nwangani Tawasi. And up until Sam Walker coming back, the Roosters have actually had a tendency for their right wing. Now, if you've been hit by injuries this week, and if you have to play Marky Mark, I think it's fine because the matchups show that there's potential for Melbourne to leak on that particular edge. And one thing I will say to people, because it's the very first game of the round, if you're able to spot it, I don't know if it's possible, but just have a look and see where Sam Walker plays this week. Because if he's playing on the right and Sanders Smith is on the left, I think that's fine for Nwangani Tawasi because Sam Walker is the dominant half. And so if he's got more of the ball and if he's on the right, then I think someone like a Marky Mark could actually be a decent play this week. So keep an eye out for that. If he's on the left, Sam Walker, and if you had a choice of Marky Mark and someone else, then maybe you can sit him. But yeah, I think the right wing spot is fine, to be honest, to play against Melbourne. Cowboys versus Dragons. Cowboys wingers and fullback is what I've highlighted. So the Dragons have conceded 10 tries to left wingers, 11 tries to right wingers, 12 tries to fullbacks, which is actually the highest of any team in the comp. So looks like a very, very good week for Drinkwater. We spoke about it earlier. The fact that Purdue's in the centres and Duffy's at 5'8", I think that is even better for Drinkwater. So Drinkwater's looking like a really strong vice captain or even a captaincy option this week, in my opinion. For the Dragons, not overly Supercoach relevant, but their left edge, could do some damage. The Cowboys have conceded 14 tries to left wing, 11 tries to left centre, and 8 tries to left second row forward. Now, the reason I mention that is because if you're like me, if you own King Tongia and Munster, if you had to roll out King Tongia this week, he's got the Cowboys. They've shown a tendency to leak points on their left edge. Maybe it's not the worst thing in the world to just play King Tongia this week and save the trade. Because someone like a Jaden Campbell is really cheap at $490k, and I've thought about maybe upgrading King Tongia to Jaden Campbell. But I've also thought, is that the best use of a trade? Oh, I don't know. So if you had to roll out King Tongia, maybe these numbers help you with that decision. For the Broncos, their wingers look like really strong prospects this week. Eels have conceded 16 tries to left wingers, 13 tries to right wingers. And I don't have it in front of me, but the Broncos all season long have scored all of their tries pretty much on the left wing. So I'll try bring it up on a separate screen just to tell you guys and confirm that. So yeah, tries scored by position. Apart from so the Broncos have scored 17 tries on their left wing. That's the same as the Rabbitohs, and that's the most of any team in the comp. There's only one more position in the entire comp that's better than that, which is the Melbourne Storm's right wing, which is 18 tries. Otherwise, that Broncos left wing spot is looking really good. And the Eels have conceded 16 tries to left wingers, which is the most except for the Tigers. Basically, Karapani is a fantastic play this week. If I had Karapani, still in your team, you 100% play him this week. Don't even think about it, in my opinion. Eels wingers also look really good. So someone like a Lomax, Broncos have conceded 9 tries on both of their wings, which isn't a huge number, but it's the weakest part of their team in terms of conceding points. So someone like a Lomax, we haven't really spoken about, but if you're trading like a, probably should speak about him, but if you're trading like a 2RF and you've got duels to get a center, I'd actually place a Lomax above Hudson Young and all those other 2RFs that we spoke about. I think Lomax is looking really good. Mitch Moses back as well. I think Lomax is in for a decent week this round. Against the Titans, the Warriors are wingers. So the Titans have just leaked points on all of their edges, basically. 15 tries to right wingers and 11 to left wingers. So RTS, Dallin Watene-Zelezniak, that could be really nice pod plays this week. If you are looking for some more point of difference options at your center. I prefer RTS. I just think he's got a better base. For the Titans, their left wing could be a good spot, but who's really trading in a Titans left winger? For the Panthers, left wing and fullback. As someone who traded in Brian To'o, this was a bit sad to see, because if you look at who they're playing this week, who are they playing this round? It beats me. I'm going to have to double check. Sorry. They're playing Tigers. Yeah, so the Tigers have conceded 17 tries to left wingers, which is the most out of anyone. So Tom Jenkins, Casey McLean could actually do really well in this game. And then fullback. They've also conceded, the West Tigers, 9 tries to fullbacks, which is up there. It's actually the second highest behind the Dragons. So, yeah, look, Dylan Edwards could do it again this week, even without the goal kicking. So I will be a little bit scared of not owning Edwards or owning Cleary this round. But, yeah, it is what it is. For Rabbitohs, not really looking at their players, so I'm probably just going to skip over that. But the Rabbitohs wingers, could maybe be an option. For the Sharks, I've highlighted lots of positions here. The Sharks hooker. So Rabbitohs have conceded 5 tries to opposing hookers, which isn't a lot. But if you actually look at the screen grab, only the Titans and West Tigers have conceded more tries to hookers at 6. So there's still obviously a tendency for the Rabbitohs to concede points through their middle. They've conceded 6 tries to props. So someone like a Brailey to Adam Fullback crash player, you can potentially write that in the script for this game. Left wing, Rabbitohs conceded 10 tries to opposing left wingers, so Mulatalo. So it could be a bit of a pod play. 5'8", so Trindle, and fullback, so Will Kennedy. So there's no obvious benefit there for the halfback in Nico Hines, but I don't think that matters. So we'll talk about it when we get to captaincy, but Nico Hines is my captain this week, I think. Just have to target the Rabbitohs. For Canberra, prop and right wing, so maybe a Tapani, maybe a who plays on the right wing for them? I can't even remember. Not Jed Stewart. Who's the other winger? Oh, beats me, unfortunately. But I don't think they're very Supercoach relevant. Knights left wing and right edge. So we haven't spoken about him again this stream, but Dane Gagai. He's been a really good centering option in the last fortnight while being named at fullback. Because the Canberra team do concede tries on the left wing, so they've conceded, 14 tries to opposing left wingers, and that's the dominant side for the Knights. You've got Bradman Best there, you've got Greg Marzu. I can see those guys all doing very well this round. So if you've already owned Gagai, I think this week's actually not a bad matchup for him if he's on one of those sweeping plays, or if you're still considering him as a bit of a point of difference center wing trade in. He does have the bye next week, but otherwise, this Canberra matchup isn't terrible, I think, for this particular matchup anyway of the edges. Bulldogs right wing, so that's Karaz. So Manly have conceded 13 tries to opposing right wingers, so that's definitely up there. It's only behind the Titans for that particular position. So I don't think I'd captain Karaz this week just because of how good Hines looks this week. If you've got the ability to go late and go VC Hines, then maybe captain Karaz. But I still don't think that's maybe the optimal play. Manly wingers. So Bulldogs have conceded 11 tries to left wingers. So I think that's really good for Garrick. So again, if you're thinking of sit v starts, the fact that Garrick's still on the left wing, I'd be very happy to play him, I think, this week. And then on the right, you've got Jason Saab. So Turbo still could maybe do well this round as well. So those are some matchups I wanted to call out. I think the key summary takes are for sit v starts, I'd be okay playing Marky Mark. I'd be definitely encouraging to play Karapani, Garrick, and if you're thinking massive pod plays, probably Gagai. look, I didn't do it in the end. I traded in Brian To'o, but on Patreon, in my Patreon chat, I messaged people saying, is Tom Jenkins an option? Because these numbers look really good for the left wing. He outscored To'o, and he's got a better looking matchup this week as well. So honestly, that left edge for Penrith of Casey McLean Jenkins could be the ultimate pod play as well. So just looking at the rest of captaincy, I think look, I've got a shorter list this week. I think the names that stand out are Drinkwater, Walsh, Edwards, Cleary, and Hines. I think they're really the spots that you want to be targeting for your captaincy this week. So yeah, Blue and Moon is saying Hines captain this week, South's the team to target. So yeah, if you look at the numbers, the Rabbitohs in the last 5 weeks have conceded the most points to opposing halfbacks, and they're third over the season. So both over the season, last 5 weeks, halfback has been a great place to be versing the Rabbitohs. So I think when I looked at those numbers and just obviously the state of that team, I think Captain Hines is probably going to be the play for me. It's an away game, but it's in Gosford, so it's actually a neutral game for both of them. So Captain Hines, I think, felt pretty obvious. For your VC, I think Drinkwater is a very good VC safe option on the Friday. So he is versing the Dragons at home. We talked about the matchup analysis just then. It looks really good for Drinkwater. The Dragons have conceded the 4th most points to opposing fullbacks in the last 5 rounds and 9th over the season. So they look pretty good. Reece Walsh is someone who I did think about because I own Reece Walsh and he would be my massive pod play. But the stats didn't really actually seem to back up a lot for this. So Parramatta have been 16th over the last 5 rounds for fullbacks. And then over the season, 11th. Like up until this year, Parramatta were always a team that leaked points to opposing fullbacks. But they've probably tightened things up with Jason Riles there. A big part of that may have been Ayongi. So maybe without Ayongi, maybe their defense isn't as good. And it's a home game, so maybe this is outthinking it by saying Walsh isn't a good option. I think he's still a perfectly good option. And I think if you're swinging for the fences, VC Walsh is probably the play. I think out of him or Drinky. But like straight shootout of points potential, I actually think Drinkwater is a better VC than Reece Walsh. Look, if you've got Edwards, he's still a fine captain option against the West Tigers. We spoke about it just then, how they've conceded a fair amount of tries to fullbacks. If you get confirmation on goal kicking, I think if Edwards is confirmed goal kicking, I would go VC Edwards, Captain Hines. I think that would be the play. If you don't get any confirmation on goal kicking, I think I would leave it. And that makes Cleary also an awkward option. So Edwards and Cleary, it's a little bit tough to really say recommending them just because we don't know the whole kicking situation. And if you don't know, and if you really want to VC someone from Penrith, Edwards would probably be the option just because he had the kicking tee last week. But I think if you don't own any Penrith players or you can't VC or captain a Penrith player, I think Drinkwater and Hines are pretty good alternatives. Someone in the chat earlier was talking about VC Karapani as a real pod play. That's definitely an option. He'd need to score a hat-trick. He doesn't have a big work rate though, so he'd have to score a hat-trick to get like 120, 130, which he's definitely capable of. I think I'd be more confident in a fullback though, especially Drinkwater who's goal kicking. That's why I kind of prefer him to Reece Walsh, to be honest. Jaden saying, one has to go without an armband, Edwards, Hines, or Drinky. Based on what I've just said, I think, crazily enough, Edwards. I think actually Drinkwater and Hines are better options than him this week. Finally, I've got Karaz because I highlighted that matchup, but I think we've got just too many other better options. I think then I'd be going Karaz. Michael is saying Hughes VC. So yeah, I didn't have anyone from Melbourne Storm or Roosters, just because again that matchup. Can I really call that game? I don't know. I don't know if there's going to be a lot of points in it. It could be a bit of a grindy game as well. I just think most people already own Hines. Most people already own Drinkwater. I just think those two are better picks than a Jerome Hughes. So I'd just be going VC Drinkwater into Hines. I reckon that's probably the common play. I'm actually just going to quickly flip to the SuperCoach app. I'm going to have a quick look. Ranked in the top 5%. Yep, ranked in the top 5%. What's the current VC? And these numbers always change because people haven't updated their teams yet. So yeah, as it currently stands, Drinkwater is the most popular VC at 36%. Edwards is the most popular captain at 27%, and then Hines is 18%. I wouldn't be surprised if Hines overtakes Edwards for most popular captain, because that could be a lot of people just sticking it on, keeping it from Edwards from the week before, which unfortunately isn't me, as sad as it is. But yeah, I think VC Drinkwater is a pretty obvious one. All right, guys, we've been going for like an hour 15. There was certain sections I didn't speak about, like center wings and 5'8". So what I'll do, let's do questions for 5 minutes. In terms of my own team, honestly, I have no idea what I'm doing because I've got Kolomatangi, Tino out. I could go one of them to Blayke Brailey, but I don't have Kalani going as my backup hooker. So I'd be short in around 25. So I'm just deciding, is that the right play for me? I probably can't get Cleary or Edwardson this week because my fullbacks are Teddy, Pappy, and Walsh. Sorry, not Pappy. Teddy, Drinkwater, and Walsh. 5'8", I've got King Tonga and Munster. King Tonga could be a play this week against the Cowboys, but if I use 2 trades, if I sell one of my second row forwards for a cheaper one, like maybe an Azayo or an Angus, then I can free up money to go King Tonga to Campbell. I've still got a few options and there's a few things I'm working out. So look, if you want my final team trades, you can find that on Patreon. But yeah, I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm very certain on captaincy. At the moment, I'm on VC, Drinkwater, Captain Hines. I can't really see that changing unless I want to swing for the fences with Walsh. But the fact that Drinkwater's got the goal kicking and not seeing Purdue in the halves gave me a lot of confidence as well to VC Drinkwater. But let's take questions for 5 or so minutes and then we'll wrap it up there. But yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in as well. And yeah, please do give the stream a like if you have enjoyed it. Stephen Crichton, the pod. Yeah, look, Stephen Crichton, he's going to probably continue to have the goal kicking. So he was goal kicking last week. 61, 64, 69 are his last 3 scores, which are very, very solid. He's never been someone with high base stats, but his base in the last 2 weeks was 34 and 42. So there's been a bit of an uptick there. It's a good matchup against the Manly Sea Eagles. Then he's got West Tigers, Warriors, Roosters, Melbourne, Penrith, Sharks. He's cheap. He's 593k. Again, it's one of those ones where I don't hate it, but I don't know if I'm feeling it because like 69, 64, and 71 are good scores, but is he the player to get you those 130s, 140s? I don't know. If you ask me which of the center wings that will get that, it's probably your low maxes and whatnot, but yeah, he's okay. Maybe not my absolute favorite. Sit v start, Talakai versus Fanul Blayke. Oof. Jeez. What has Talakai done? Keep an eye on that because I've heard something about... No, actually, never mind. I thought that was with Hiroti coming back in, but that's obviously not happened. So Talakai scored 57, 51 the last 2 weeks with all base power. Fanul Blayke's really been a bit down. 46, 39, 52. Jesus. I actually wouldn't hate going Talakai just because he's on the edges. And he's a good chance of maybe getting an attacking stat. So is Fanul Blayke. Let's quickly look at the matchup analysis. Rabbitohs have only conceded 6 tries to left centres, 6 tries to props, so it's kind of the same. They've conceded 11 tries to opposing 5'8" though, so maybe the ball will just be a bit more down the left edge with Trindle. Yeah, sounds mad, but I think I'd actually play Talakai. Thoughts on swapping Donahue to second row forward and selling Keon to Brailey, Teddy to Cleary, thinking of running 3 halfbacks. Yeah, we didn't really talk about the whole 3 halfback versus 3 fullback chat. I think it makes sense to go 3 halfbacks if you're selling Pappy this week. I don't think I'd go Teddy to Cleary though. I know he's not looked as good the last few weeks, but there's just still part of me that thinks that he's too good to not turn it around. So I don't think I'd go Teddy to Cleary, Jason. Keon to Brailey, though, we spoke about that before. I think that's completely fine because, yeah, Brailey's base power has actually been on par with a lot of these other 2RFs. Is Galvin a buy? Look, again, trades at 5'8". How much is he? 444k. If it were me, if you were in the position where you're selling to Galvin, let's say you're selling King Tonga, I think I would just pay 45k more and get Campbell. If you're in the situation where you don't have Campbell. Again, thinking of guys who are capable of those huge 100 plus scores, I don't think Galvin is in that category. I think Galvin's going to be more your solid 50 to 70 each week. Campbell can also get those 50s, but we know that he can go big and score big tons. He scored 170 at one point last year. I think I would take Campbell. Is Galvin a buy? He's probably fine as a buy due to his price, but again, how many trades would I be using at 5'8"? I'm not sure. It's not like the best position out there. And speaking of 5'8", shout out as well to guys like Ethan Strange, who've got, I think he's got like I have got a slide on it. He's got a 5-round average of 81, which is mad. But don't know if he's an option. But yeah, Galvin's potentially one. I think I'd take Campbell though. He's 490k. I think he's just got a similar floor with goal kicking, but yeah, I think bigger ceiling as well. Brailey running has killed Fullback's output. Yeah, that's a good shout actually, Shane. Start or sit Shiba. I've already got 4 Broncos. A bit worried over rejuvenated Eels with Moses back. If you're thinking about playing Shibasaki, I think I'd play Shibasaki. So looking at this, they've conceded 8 tries to left centers, the Eels. There's a few teams that are worse than that, but you can see that there's definitely a weakness on that right edge. I think I'd play Shibasaki. I wouldn't worry about loading up on Broncos players this week. I think when they've got a good matchup, you know, loading up on all of them is completely fine. Lachlan saying, I was looking at VC Edwards, C Hines. Yeah, I think we spoke about that before. If you're happy to take that thing on Edwards, then yeah, VC Edwards, C Hines. I think Hines is the best captain option this week, so I would definitely try to have something on him. But yeah, VC Edwards is completely cool. All right, let's see if there's a couple more questions before we wrap it up. Someone was asking about Karaz and thought he was getting suspended for 2 weeks. No, that was if he fought the charge and lost. But early guilty plea, I think he would just get a fine of $2,500. So yeah, Karaz is fine to play. I assume that Karaz is just going to take the early plea and play. Unfortunately, Campbell playing behind a forward pack who don't seem to give a shiz. Yeah, that is true. That is true about Campbell. So yeah, that's the other thing as well. Like, it's another thing that's making me think don't trade him in. And just run out King Tonga and pray to God that he can get something this week against the Cowboys. I'll take 50 points from King Tonga this week, just so that I can keep Munster, because I want to hold on to Munster. He's got Parramatta next week. There's a few other good matchups on the run home. So yeah, I think Munster I'll try to hold on to. Basically what I'm saying is I don't really want to use too many trades at 5'8". All right, let's take one more question. James saying, thoughts on trading out Karapani for a third fullback, either Edwards or Teddy. Currently have Drinkwater and Pappy. Also, I must say the beer's looking great tonight. What products do you use for? Okay. Look, I wouldn't be selling Karapani this week just based on this matchups. If you got Pappenhausen, just sell Pappenhausen for Edwards or Teddy. If you don't own Teddy already, I'd probably be happy to fade for the time being. Yeah, just go. I mean, if you got Pappy at flex, just because you go Pappy to Cleary. Otherwise, if you have to get a fullback, then yeah, Pappy to Edwards. But yeah, I wouldn't be selling Karapani. Selling Pappy, would you rather get Cleary or Edwards? Cleary. I've kind of, if you wind back James to the fullback discussion, spend a bit of time talking about that. But yeah, I think Cleary for me. All right, guys. Going to wrap up the stream there. Hopefully another good one that you all enjoyed. Please do give the stream a like if you did. Follow me on, subscribe to YouTube if you're new around here. Follow me on Instagram, Patreon, Twitter, all those good things. Obviously, it was a tough week last week, but hopefully we can turn it around this week. Also, I probably should make this announcement. So I will be on the SC Ballers watch along this week. That will be Thursday evening. Melbourne Storm versus the Roosters. So I'll be doing that. I believe NRL Physio is also on that stream as well. So definitely. If you want to see more of me, you can see me for like a couple of hours on Thursday evening. We generally do a Q&A before the game start as well. So that might be a good chance as well to get my updated final thoughts on anything. I'll be doing that on Thursday evening, which is going to be super exciting. So yeah, make sure to subscribe to the channel as well so you don't miss that. And also, of course, you probably all know NRL Physio. But of course, do go and follow the SC Ballers as well on their platform so you definitely don't miss it. But yeah, we're doing that Thursday evening, which would be awesome. So if you want to chill back for a couple of hours, have some beers, watch us, watch grown men watch footy. That'll be the place to be. But that'll be me on Thursday evening. But we will catch you all then, and hopefully you all enjoyed it, and have a good evening, and see you in the next one.